Welcome everyone to ISKCON of Silicon Valley, all of those who have joined us here in the live studio audience, as well as all of you who have joined us with great anticipation online. This morning we have our favorite speaker here at ISV. All year long we simply mope around and wait until he comes back. Radhika Raman Prabhu is an international treasure. He's born into the Krishna consciousness movement and has distinguished himself from his childhood as pure Vaishnava, and then went on to distinguish himself in academic studies at Oxford, and now is doing good all over the world through his writings, through his teachings, through his personal example. And therefore, it's with great joy in our hearts that we have assembled here to hear from him today. The topic today will be seeking and offering forgiveness, lessons from the Srimad Bhagavatam. It will be in two parts. Today, starting from now until noon, when we'll have a Pushpanjali ceremony, because today is the Divine Appearance Day of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. We'll have Pushpanjali followed by a feast. And then tomorrow he'll take up again at 9 o'clock in the morning, if I'm not incorrect?
12.
At 12 and go until 2. 12 till 2 tomorrow, which will be part 2 of the seminar. So please give a very vigorous welcome to His Grace Radhika Raman Prabhu.
This should be fine.
Oh, I see. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Jashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Jashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Jashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Jashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Jashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Jashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Ram Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradhari Jaya Jaya Gopi Jannavalabha Girivaradhari Jaya Jashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana 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 Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Bolo. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Haribol, 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 Gaura Haribol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So thank you all so much for being here and for having me here again. I think I've said this before, but it bears being said again, that ISKCON Silicon Valley is definitely my favorite audience in terms of giving seminars. You're very careful listeners and really sharp questioners and attentive participants, and that is more than 50% of the magic for any seminar and the best thing possible for a speaker. So I really, really appreciate being here. I just realized this is being recorded and broadcast, so I hope devotees in other temples don't feel upset about it. I mean, no criticism at all, but I'm here in front of the ISV devotees, and I must express my appreciation. So thank you all so much. The topic, as Vaisheshika Prabhu mentioned already, is seeking forgiveness and offering forgiveness, lessons from the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is a perennially relevant question, or topic rather. It's eternally something that's useful and important in our lives. They say to err is human, and if anyone is even a little bit honest, they will recognize the fact that we make mistakes of our own on a regular basis. And also we see others make mistakes towards us. And so the process of trying to get forgiveness, to be forgiven, and to forgive is essential. So what I want to do particularly here, there's of course, you can find many seminars, not just amongst devotees, but in the secular world on forgiveness. It's a very important element of people's lives, just to live healthy and happy lives. You can find all kinds of self-help books on the topic. So much has been said. So the purpose of this seminar particularly is to give a perspective on forgiveness from Srimad Bhagavatam. We have in Srimad Bhagavatam perhaps the most comprehensive collection of different stories and examples and persons who are in need of forgiveness or in need of forgiving another person. Because more so than anything else, and this is something that in reading Srimad Bhagavatam over the years more and more has come to strike me, that more so than anything else, the Bhagavatam is really a story of failures, of failed human and even godly attempts at doing the right thing. And then not just failure, that would be depressing, but it's failure plus recovery. How do we move from the point of making a mistake, of failing, of stumbling, and then how do we recover from it? Just to get the audience moving and to get your minds moving, call out examples of instances in Bhagavatam where people have slipped and failed. Can you do that, please? King Chitraketu. Daksha, excellent. Jad Bharata. Nalkuvar and Manigriva. Indra, more than once. Maybe 3, 4 times. Lord Brahma, good. Durvasa. Gajendra, yeah, he's from his previous life, excellent. Yeah? Yes, Vyasadeva in the beginning. He's completely lost as to what to do, confused. Parikshit, yeah, that's the source of the whole story, right? The whole, yeah, Yayati, and you said Dhruva Maharaj also. He was, with the yakshas. Any others come to mind? Prachina Barhishat. Bharat Maharaj. Ajamila. We didn't say Ajamila yet. There was, who was the sage meditating underwater? Sobari. Sobari Muni, right, is another example. Kardama Muni and Devahuti is in one sense that story as well. Kardama Muni comes before the Lord after years and years of perfect renunciation and tells the Lord, I just need to re-enter this material world for some time. Please find me a wife. And Krishna does so. Did we mention churning of the ocean? No. Yeah. So there, I think there's, if I counted correctly, there's maybe 7 failures that take place across the story. 7 times the demigods are in trouble and Krishna has to come and lift them up, right? Jai and Vijay, okay, Jai and Vijay is a big example. And as Vaisheshika Prabhu already mentioned, the entire story of Srimad Bhagavatam, the spark which sets it going is the story of a failure, right? Or of a stumble, rather, a stumble on the part of Maharaj Parikshit and on the part of Shringi in terms of the whole snake story. So, I don't think we've actually covered them all. We could continue giving other examples, I'm sure, but you get the idea, right? You get the idea that Srimad Bhagavatam is a litany. It's a repeated example after example of what it's like to stumble, to fall, to fail, to become weak. And then what are the consequences of that, and what are the different ways to recover from it? Just one of the consequences of stumbling is that you often get cursed in Bhagavatam, yes? Some sage or demigod or someone comes and curses you. And of course, this is again the start of Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam begins because of a curse. And there are curses repeatedly. And so I one time, this is several years ago, I did a study of the different curses in Srimad Bhagavatam and put them in different categories to try to make sense of different kinds of curses, a cursology of Bhagavatam. And it's really interesting. There's different kinds of curses, and these are mutually overlapping categories, but there's the predictive curse, which is basically it's a curse that predicts what's going to happen anyway. It's the Lord's plan, and He needs a reason for it to happen. Like when the Yadu dynasty is cursed, by the sage to destroy itself, right? It's going to happen anyway. It's Krishna's plan, but a curse facilitates it. There's kind of revengeful curses where there's angry, where there's fighting happening, the combative curse. And this happens in the Daksha Yajna. The two sides are cursing and counter-cursing each other. And then there's the curse that is a blessing in disguise. That's not actually a curse, even though it's presented like a curse. Like Nalkuvar and Manigriva being cursed, but really blessed to see Krishna after their lifetime as trees. So the curse is just one consequence of failure in Bhagavatam. Or a stumble. There are other consequences as well that take place as a result of misdoing. But the fundamental point is that the Bhagavatam really is a story of, first of all, impressing upon us that it's not a question of if we will fall down, it's a question of when we will fall down, right? And when we do, then how do we get up and get going, right? What is the method of recovery from it? And that's really where you see the quality of the individual devotee, right? They stumble, but then they come up, and when they arise again, it's ever more glorious and it's ever more exciting, and they come back even greater than they were in the past. And so we see so many different varieties of recoveries in Bhagavatam. From Jad Bharat's fall from the position of bhava and his recovery, which took a couple of lifetimes to do, to Jay and Vijay's recovery, which took 3 lifetimes to recover, to much faster recoveries that are like Lord Brahma's, where he comes to his senses and begs forgiveness in these beautiful prayers in the 10th canto, to Parikshit Maharaj's recovery, where he says, okay, I'm going to embrace the curse, and off I go to listen to Srimad Bhagavatam, right? So if you think about the different kinds of failures and the reasons for them, the different responses or reactions that you get from those failures, the consequences of those failures, and then you look at the recoveries from the failures. Each of those 3 parts, Bhagavatam gives you just about every psychological situation you can imagine is there, right? Any type of challenge we are facing in our own lives, any conflict, any trouble, any weakness, we can find a narrative in Srimad Bhagavatam that will speak to that situation, that will give us guidance. People fall, they stumble differently than if they're beginning spiritual life, in the case of Ajamil, for example, or if they're at the level of bhava, they stumble differently. Men stumble differently in Bhagavatam than women do. Younger do differently than older people do. Kings do it differently than Brahmins do. It's such a variety of situations and possibilities. So it's really a theme. It's really a theme in Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's worth a closer look. The Bhagavatam is trying to tell us something in giving us these stories again and again and again. And the hope in this seminar is to look at a few of those. Maybe half a dozen or so will involve in the course, and maybe you can contribute others that come to mind. But really to create a practical model, a practical set of guidelines for how we can respond to such situations when we need to be forgiven or when we need to forgive. And both of these sides of the picture are equally important, and they're equally difficult to do. To seek forgiveness is really tough. We probably all have the experience of catching our heart in our throat and going, how do I approach this when I've done something wrong, or being accused of doing something wrong and then coming to recognize it. But the other side, in terms of offering forgiveness, is just as difficult, actually, to do. It's not easy to forgive, especially when we have been wronged in a significant way. So the Bhagavatam provides us many tips, and it provides us a method. More than tips, it provides us a method. And what I've tried to do in this seminar is to try to take as many examples as I could in my own study and distill them to find a common method across those examples. What emerges really interestingly is, although the situations are very different that lead to the need for forgiveness, the method that the devotees go through to seek forgiveness is actually fairly consistent. There's a broad pattern that they go through in trying to seek forgiveness. And there's also a broad pattern in terms of offering forgiveness as to the components of what that looks like. Okay, so we'll try to do this philosophically and theoretically, but also bring it down to a practical level, something that hopefully we can take away from the seminar and implement on the basis of Bhagavatam and our own study. So, yeah, that's the plan. There's basically 3 parts. I want to talk about first, offer some inspiration for engaging in forgiving and being forgiven by looking at Krishna's example of forgiveness. And then I want to look at how to be forgiven, and then how to forgive. Okay, so 3 parts, and hopefully we'll get through the first 2 today and then the third part tomorrow. So, that's the plan. I want to begin by reading a verse from Bhagavad Gita. When you if I asked you to think of a verse in Bhagavad Gita that is relevant to the topic of forgiveness, what might come to your mind? And the translation?
That the topmost yogi is the one who has empathy for others and sees his or her own situation in the material world in relation to them.
Wonderful, wonderful. So, seeing others like oneself. Atmavat sarva bhuteshu. Yes. My devotee never perishes. Yes. 9th chapter. Excellent. Any other verse come to mind?
Apichet suduracharo verse.
Yeah, apichet suduracharo. Even if one commits the most abominable activity, if they are a devotee, then Krishna forgives. So, to get us started, it's nice to hear from Srila Prabhupada, and I thought we could read the verse translation and part of the, let's read all of it, of Srila Prabhupada's purport. It's very powerful. Chapter 9, text number 30. Apichet suduracharo, very powerful, where Krishna speaks of forgiveness, his own forgiveness to the devotee, and Prabhupada speaks, he offers a wonderful purport on forgiveness in the life of a devotee particularly, so relevant for our context. So please repeat. Apichet suduracharo bhajate mam ananya bhak sadhureva samantavya samyak vyavasito hisa apichet suduracharo bhajate mam ananya bhak sadhureva samantavya samyak vyavasito hisa apichet suduracharo bhajate mam ananya bhak sadhureva samantavya samyak vyavasito hisa. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Even if one commits the most abominable action, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. Purport. The word sudurachara used in this verse is very significant, and we should understand it properly. When a living entity is conditioned, he has two kinds of activities. One is conditional, and the other is constitutional. As for protecting the body or abiding by the rules of society and state, certainly there are different activities, even for the devotees, in connection with the conditional life, and such activities are called conditional. Besides these, the living entity who is fully conscious of his spiritual nature and is engaged in Krishna consciousness or the devotional service of the Lord has activities which are called transcendental. Such activities are performed in his constitutional position, and they are technically called devotional service. Now, in the conditioned state, sometimes devotional service and the conditional service in relation to the body will parallel one another. But then again, sometimes these activities become opposed to one another. As far as possible, devotee is very cautious so that he does not do anything that could disrupt his wholesome condition. He knows that perfection in his activities depends on his progressive realization of Krishna consciousness. Sometimes, however, it may be seen that a person in Krishna consciousness commits some act which may be taken as most abominable socially and politically. But such a temporary fall down does not disqualify him. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that if a person falls down but is wholeheartedly engaged in the transcendental service of the Supreme Lord, the Lord, being situated within his heart, purifies him and excuses him from that abomination. The material contamination is so strong that even a yogi fully engaged in the service of the Lord sometimes becomes ensnared. But Krishna consciousness is so strong that such an occasional fall down is at once rectified. Therefore, the process of devotional service is always a success. No one should deride a devotee for some accidental fall down from the ideal path, for as explained in the next verse, such occasional fall downs will be stopped in due course, as soon as a devotee is completely situated in Krishna consciousness. So I'm going to pause here because this, Prabhupada is making a very, very significant point here in terms of the two types of life that we all lead, right? He's pinpointing the cause for our stumbles, that we've got these parallel lives going, the conditional life and the life of a devotee, the transcendental, the devotional service life. And we live in both of these worlds. I mean, I know for myself, here I am sitting in dhoti and kurta and tilak and pretending to be a devotee and a speaker and everything. And as soon as I get on that plane and off I go and get to my university, on Monday morning, I've got meetings and I'm the professor and I've got this committee and that committee, and all of a sudden I back off from this identity and I say, we have to look at all religions in a very systematic and very equal way, and we have to be objective and all of that. And it's a different hat, right? It's a different hat. And those two lives coexist in me. And sometimes, as Prabhupada is saying, occasionally they are integrated, they're wholesome, they're all together. But other times they don't, right? We're not integrated. And when we're not integrated, then the two can conflict, and we can act in one way even though we would rather act in another. And that becomes the cause of a stumble. And the stumble then creates cause for forgiveness. So Prabhupada is getting at the very root of the condition that leads to all the situations that we talked about from Bhagavatam, right? It's the word here Prabhupada is using is beautiful. It's the lack of the wholesome condition, We're not whole. We've got parts and pieces to our lives, different worlds that we inhabit, different masks that we wear in different situations, and occasionally they conflict. They don't end up being together, and that causes the challenge. Now, we typically look at this verse from Gita as something that provides hope for us or talks about the nature of the devotee. Even if the devotee stumbles or makes a mistake, Krishna is kind. He forgives. But I want to look at this verse for a moment in terms of what it says about Krishna, the speaker, rather than us and the devotees. Look at the quality of Krishna's character as is manifested in this verse. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that Krishna here, he's making a statement of confidence in his devotee, offering protection, and saying, as in the next verse, the two verses go together, Kshipram bhavati dharmatma shashvat chantim nigacchati kaunteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. That my devotee never perishes, I promise you this. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that it is the fire of remorse in the heart of the devotee that burns up the sinful reaction that caused the offense in the first place. It's the fire of remorse. And as a result of that, Krishna saying, my devotee very quickly becomes righteous. Kshipram bhavati dharmatma. He becomes good again as a result of that fire of remorse. But then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur raises the question, well, what if he or she doesn't become quickly righteous? And certainly we know this in our own lives, right? We can commit the same mistake once, and then twice, and then a third time, and then a fourth time, and again. And even then, if you're familiar with Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on Gita, he's always revealing to us Krishna's mind, his emotions as he's speaking. He's reading between the lines, between the verses, and filling in the internal dialogue that's taking place in Krishna and Arjuna. And he says Krishna is becoming a little angry at the thought of that question of why are you trying to find fault in the devotee? And so he becomes even more firm. Name bhakta pranashyati. My devotee never perishes. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that even if we repeatedly commit the same mistake, if we have the mood as follows, that Krishna, I am such a sinner, and because of me, the devotee, the Vaishnava community is embarrassed. I am an embarrassment to the community of devotees because of my character. Please forgive me. Krishna will tolerate even multiple iterations of the same offense. And then finally, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that people often like to gossip about the bad qualities of devotees. That this is a frequent pastime in the general public. And it's a natural thing too, because as devotees, we are trying to represent Krishna. We are on the path of bhakti. And so faults and flaws that you see in a devotee particularly stand out very clearly, right? So you meet someone at work who's envious and vicious in their behavior, and you think, well, this is the nature of the world. But then we see it amongst devotees, and people often say, well, how is this possible? If devotees do this kind of thing, then what hope is there? Or what use is your process? So we often like to particularly lodge criticism, like the black spot on a white cloth, very clearly visible. And so at that point, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that Krishna is becoming even more angry. And he tells Arjuna, he says, you go into such assemblies where my devotees are being criticized. You raise your hands into the air and you declare it boldly, pratijanihi, name bhakta pranashyati, my devotee never perishes. Why? Because he says, they will not believe me, Krishna says. Therefore, you tell them that my devotee will never perish. As an aside, this has a very important lesson for us also as Krishna's devotees and as preachers, that it is our job as Krishna's representatives to make Krishna believable, to make Krishna trustable, trustworthy. Because Krishna sometimes doesn't do a good job of that himself. He doesn't make himself all that believable when he goes back on his promise or he hides his intentions from others. In the story of Bhishma Dev's passing away from this world, Bhishma Dev is lamenting the fact that the Pandavas have had to go through so much suffering, so much pain, and he asks. He wonders out loud, how is it possible that you, who are the friends of the Supreme Lord himself, Arjun and Yudhishthira, have had to suffer so much in this world? And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur again raises the question. He says he's wondering this and he's getting all confused. But Krishna's standing right there in front of him. Why doesn't he just ask? He should ask him and say, why? Why are your friends having to suffer like this? And the reason he doesn't ask? Because even if he were to ask, Krishna would not answer. And even if Krishna were to answer, you would not be able to understand his answer. He would speak in such confusing ways that you would be, I don't know. I still don't understand. His point being that Krishna is intentionally reticent. He's intentionally hesitant about revealing his ways, and particularly when it comes to suffering and troubles and challenges. Krishna hides. He keeps it away. Because as he hides that from his devotee, it becomes an opportunity for the devotee to both strengthen and express his or her faith in the Lord. When Krishna, you see, if Krishna told us, if Krishna were so kind as he was to tell us, I'm going to put you in this suffering and I want you to learn this from it and it'll be over by this time. Then we would all, most of us, would cheerfully go through our life and say, sure, Krishna, I'm happy to do this for you. But most of the time, we don't know whether it's Krishna giving us that suffering to begin with, or whether it's our own mind or Maya Devi or who's giving it, or that person I know who's making me suffer. Secondly, we don't know when or if it'll end, because when we're in the middle of it, it feels like it's forever. Right? And thirdly, and most importantly, we don't see the point of that suffering. We don't know why Krishna is doing this to us, why he's putting us through that insult or that stumble or that problem. And as a result of that, we go into the situation blind. But the thing about going into a situation blind is that you're forced to trust whoever's there. And the only person there in that situation typically tends to be Krishna. Usually, in the more difficult the situation, the more we lose our other sources of support. Our family bails on us, our friends bail on us. We don't know what to do in that time. Or they don't bail, but they max out in terms of how they can help us. No one's in our heart, no one can help us 100%. And so then we're forced to rely on Krishna. We're forced to grope in the dark and to catch hold of him and go, okay, you're here. I hope you're here. Please guide me through this. And so, often when troubles come, then it's, for myself, my prayer is often to Krishna, I'm happy to go through whatever you want me to go through. Just let me know that this is what you want me to go through, right? If you tell me that this is your desire, that this is your purpose, then okay, we'll go through this, right? But having trust in Krishna that this is your wish, that this is your purpose, that this is your mercy, that's the growth, that's the challenge. That's how we grow in our Krishna consciousness. And this is why Krishna hides his intention. This is why he works in confusing ways. This is why he doesn't, he's not straightforward in his speech. And this is why he tells Arjun in the next verse, he says, Arjun, you go and tell everyone. You're a Kshatriya, right? And you've been making straight speech your whole life. This is the nature of a Kshatriya. They say it as it is. And people trust them because they keep their word, saying, you go tell the world, my devotee never perishes. Right? So this is our role as devotees. It's our job to make Krishna believable, to make him trustworthy for others. And we can often do that from our own experience. We can say, look, let me tell you, I know Krishna is not a great communicator, but he has acted in my life, and when I went through this, he was there. And he behaved in this way, and he helped me through. So I'm sure he will do it for you too. Here's how you can approach him for refuge. And then we can be Krishna's friend. And this is why in Nectar of Devotion, Srila Prabhupada says that preaching as an activity is in the mood of Sakhya, it's in the mood of friendship towards Krishna. That you're acting as Krishna's well-wisher by reaching out and saying, Krishna, I'm going to help you out here in the public's eyes, in other people's eyes. So, this verse here, okay, Krishna's making a very important point. If we look at his character, he reveals something very sweet and very deep about his heart, which is, he's saying here that if the devotee commits even a big mistake, but his intention is good, sadhureva saman, samyak vyavasito, he's properly or she's properly situated in intention, then I'm willing to ignore the actual action. In other words, to put it simply, if the intention is good, but the action is bad, Krishna is willing to forgive the action and take the intention. Can anyone offer an example from Srimad Bhagavatam of an instance where Krishna ignores the action, forgives the action, and accepts the intention of the devotee? We need that. Yes. So perhaps the most important example that you just said is of, you said Putana, but her situation is actually the reverse. Her intention is terrible. Her action is acceptable. Okay, but I need an example of the reverse situation there in the back.
Bhishma Dev's fighting.
Sorry, too many people in the back. Okay,
Bhishma Dev, who was on Kaurava's side, he was fighting against Arjuna, but his intention was to serve.
Good, excellent example. So Bhishma Dev's intent was to serve the Lord, but his action was to fight against him and even to injure him at times. And Krishna not only forgave that action, he really enjoyed it as well. Yes. Mike in the back.
Vritrasura, who was fighting with Indra.
Yes, another great example. So Vritrasura's action was to try to kill Indra. His intention was, you please kill me so I can go back to Godhead. And how can I serve the Lord as a devotee? So intention, action, Krishna gave him bhakti, pure bhakti, as a result of, he was Chitraketu, as a result of his good intention. Yes.
Vidura's wife who offered banana.
Yes, that was not so much an offense to begin with, but yes, she Vidura's wife offers Krishna the banana peels, and Krishna accepts that. The action is poor, but the intention is perfect.
Mother Yashoda putting Krishna down to kind of leaving her aside and then going to attend the stuff.
Yes. Mother Yashoda puts Krishna down, and on the surface he becomes very angry and cries as a result of being neglected, and yet her action is perfect because her intention was to serve the Lord by looking after the pot of milk that was boiling on the stove. In the back,
hello. Sudana's his Prithu Kaika Mushtim, his fist of Eka Prithu.
Yes, the broken grains of rice that were offered by Sudama with great intention, but the action itself was very limited. Yes.
I remember in one pastime, Lord Chaitanya slept across the doorway, and I think one of his servants had to get out to guard the door, but to do that he had to step over Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Yes.
Govinda, he had to fend, like he did committed a sinful activity towards Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but all in good intention, to guard the door.
Wonderful, wonderful, perfect example, right? The action itself was offensive, technically speaking, to step over the body of the Lord, but the intention was to serve the Lord. Another similar example, Chaitanya Charitamrita, is the lady who climbs upon the Lord's shoulders to see Jagannath when the Lord is leaning against Garuda Stamba, and the Lord is like, don't worry, it's okay. I wish I had so much enthusiasm to see the Lord. One more, and then we move on.
King Chitraketu also, because when he laughed at Lord Shiva,
yes,
Parvati, his intention was not bad, but his action of laughing.
Yes, King Chitraketu is another great example of that as well. One more I can add is Jai and Vijay. When the Lord's protection and His forgiveness in that regard is really wonderfully evident. When the four Kumaras come to the gates of Vaikuntha, then Jai and Vijay make a mistake. They don't recognize who they are. And it's a genuine mistake. The four Kumaras are just children. They're not dressed at all. They're showing up uninvited. It's not expected. And they come marching in, and Jai and Vijay do their job, or they think they're doing their duty by stopping them. And as a result of that mistake, they get cursed to go down to this material world for many lifetimes. But when this happens, then Bhagavatam describes that the Lord comes rushing out from inside. He comes running, and in so much anxiety because of this promise he's made, Name Bhakta Pranashyati, my devotee will never perish, and yet here's two devotees who are ready to perish into the material world as a result of a mistake that they committed. And he's promised in Bhagavad Gita that even if you commit a mistake, you won't perish. So he's in anxiety and he runs out. And the acharyas say that, the Bhagavatam describes that he has his hand on the shoulder of Garuda when he comes outside. And the acharyas ask, why his hands on the shoulder of Garuda? A more usual pose for the Lord is him standing on the back of Garuda or sitting on the Garuda. But the acharyas explain that the Lord was in such a rush that Garuda was not able to keep up with the Lord. He was running behind him and saying, please use my services. I can get you there quickly. But the Lord was already ahead. And so when they got to the gates, he did not want Garuda to feel bad, as if the Lord had neglected him. So to make him feel okay, he put his hand on his shoulder and said, it's okay, you're still my friend, you're still my devotee, your services are much appreciated. And he puts his hand on his shoulder. It says, Bhagavatam says that he comes barefoot. And the acharyas explain the Lord is thinking in his mind, he's thinking, these four Kumaras cursed my devotees because they were so anxious to see my lotus feet. So if I come barefoot, they will see my lotus feet clearer and better and faster, and maybe they will give up their anger quickly and forgive them. The Lord's mood is so protective towards Jai and Vijay. Actually, the acharyas amongst themselves, they have many different opinions as to who is at fault in this situation. Jai, and some say that Jai and Vijay is at fault. The Bhagavatam says that they are at fault. But other acharyas say it's less their fault and more the fault of the Kumaras, because they displayed anger. And anger is not something, a good quality to display in the spiritual world particularly. They were not self-controlled and they were not humble in their behavior. And the Bhagavatam shifts to blaming them at one point. And finally, at the end, the Bhagavatam blames Krishna for everything. It says, it's all the Lord's plan and it was his fault. It was all ordained. In fact, not only does the Bhagavatam blame different people, but in the story, each person accepts responsibility for the whole situation in turn. Initially, it's Jai and Vijay who accept responsibility. And the Lord comes out and they say, we are at fault. We made a mistake. Whatever punishment you decree, we will accept. The only thing we ask is that wherever we go, we do not forget you. And that's why they became demons, completely focused on the Lord. They were demons, but they never forgot Krishna. In fact, they remembered him even more intensively, right? As Hiranyakashipu and as Ravana and Shishupal. So they take responsibility, but seeing Krishna's behavior and Jai and Vijay's behavior, the four Kumaras start to feel really remorseful in their heart. And they tell the Lord, my Lord, we have cursed two innocent persons. Whatever punishment you want to give us, we are happy to take. And you know how they come to this recognition? By what Krishna says. Krishna tells them, he's so expert with his words. He's so expert, he's so diplomatic. On the surface, he's praising them. He's saying, you are Brahmins. And you are worshipable. You're like a deity to me. I take the dust from your feet, and therefore anything you want to do to them, I will accept. Because actually they're my servants, it's my responsibility. So even if you want to cut off both of my arms, I will happily do that for you. Who are his two arms? Jai and Vijay. Right? He's speaking in a metaphor. He's telling them, my dear sages, you have just cut off both of my arms. Oh, and I'm happy to do that for you. And of course, the four Kumaras are devotees. They're sages. They're wise. They understand. And they feel so remorseful. They feel so bad about the fact that we have harmed these two devotees. And in the process, we've harmed the very Lord. We've given pain to that Lord whom we came to see. We came for his darshan, and we ended up cutting off his arms. And so they beg for forgiveness. And finally, at the end of it, Krishna says, look, it's neither one of your fault. This was all planned and ordained by me. The story goes back, and the whole thing, he takes responsibility for himself. And he tells the backstory to this as well. So it's a wonderful example of how Krishna took the intention of Jai and Vijay and he ignored the action. He said, you did make a mistake and they did have to deal with the consequences. But really, you don't deserve to be cursed, and I will be with you every step of the way. 3 lifetimes you have to take. I will take 3 births myself in the material world. What a wonderful thing, right? The devotee is cursed to take 3 births in the material world. And Krishna takes that curse on his own head. And he says, okay, if you have to take 3 births in the material world, I'm going to take 3 births in the material world. Not even one of those births does he deal with from a distance. Not even one of them does he delegate to someone else. He says, 3 times, I'm going to come. Hiranyakashipu, Lord Ramachandra, and Krishna. To be right there with you. And then a 4th time is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So when Krishna, when the intention is good and the action is poor, Krishna accepts the intention and ignores the action. On the other hand, if the action is good, but the intention is poor, guess what Krishna does? He accepts the action and ignores the intention. A wonderful example of that is already been given, and that is of Putana. And this is probably the finest example. Aho bakiyam stanaka lakutam. Oh, how merciful is Krishna. This is Uddhava. I think it's Uddhav, yes? Speaking to Vidura or Maitreya? Vidura. So Vidura is there asking him to teach him, and Uddhav is too overwhelmed with emotion to actually teach him, which is why he sends him to Maitreya. But when Uddhav reveals something of his heart, his relationship with Krishna in these verses, as he's trying to compose himself and say something. And of all the different things he could remember of the Lord, this is one thing that he highlights, even though he himself was not present at this Leela, right? This is how powerful this Leela is, that he remembers and praises the Lord for something that he himself did not witness, even though he was Krishna's intimate friend. He could have said so many things, I'm sure. But he says, how wonderful, how amazing, how compassionate is my Lord, that this woman came to him with the intent to kill him by smearing poison on her breast. And yet, the Lord gave her the position of his own mother in the spiritual world. He gives her a destination. He does well, he does good to all the demons he kills, but her, something very special, much more than the other demons, because her action was so wonderful. She came as a mother. And Krishna thought, wow, this is so nice. He accepted the action and ignored the intention of the devotee. Bhavagrahi Janardana. He accepts the intention, but the beautiful thing is he'll also do the reverse. He'll take the action when he needs to and ignore whatever our intention is. And this is really good for us. This is really good for us. Yeah? So often we're doing kirtan and our intent or our mind is somewhere else, yes? Or we're doing japa, or we're engaged in so many things and the mind is elsewhere. So our intent is gone, but our action is still there. The body's going, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna. And so Krishna says, okay, let's accept that, right? Let's accept that behavior of yours and let it. So Prabhupada, in the purport to that verse, 3.2.23, the Putana verse, Prabhupada has this beautiful line that he ends the purport with, which is really one of these, in my last seminar I talked about Prabhupada's poetic quality, that he's such a poet in prose. He writes poetry in prose. In Sanskrit it's called gadya. And this is one of those things that you can just kind of frame. He says, the Lord accepts the least qualification of the living entity and awards him the highest reward. That is the standard of his character. The Lord accepts the least qualification of the living entity and awards him the highest reward. That is the standard of his character. Another example is Ajamil. Ajamil was also, his intent was to call his son. His action was to call the Lord. The Lord accepted the action and said, someone's calling me. And he sends the Vishnudutas to protect him, even though, and the Yamadutas, they know this. They say, he's a fake. He wasn't calling you. We know that. And the Lord is not, he's not moved by that argument. Right? He's really, he's not impressed. And the Yamadutas then go back to Yamaraj and they tell him, Vedo pranihite dharma. Vedo pranihito dharma. Dharma is outlined in the Vedas. And what do the Vedas tell us? That intention and action are both essential. They're both important for the quality of the result. This is Vedic injunction. This is how the Vedas teach us to do our rituals and our worship and our activity. The Vedas outline this and they did not fulfill this. They complained to Yamaraj. And Yamaraj responds By saying what? Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. Right? So there's that verse that Prabhupada quotes hundreds of times, that line. And that line, it's really nice to read these verses in context, because that line is a direct response. It's a rejection of the claim that the Yamadutas made a few verses ago. They use very similar words. They define dharma. Dharma, Veda, Pranihita. Dharma is that which is outlined in the Vedas. And Yamaraj is like, nope. Dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. Dharma is that which is given by the Lord. In other words, if Krishna wants to take the action and ignore the man's intention, that's his right. That's his prerogative. And there's nothing we can do about it. Not you and not me. Right? So, now we've got two things. If the intention is good and the action is bad, Krishna takes the intention, forgives the action. If the action is good, if the intention is good and if the action is good and the intention is bad, then Krishna accepts the action and ignores the intention. Now, the next logical question, what if both are bad? Both the intention and the action are poor. Then Krishna forgives as soon as we ask for forgiveness. With the others, he forgives very quickly because he finds the one good thing and he takes that and he uses that as the basis, as the justification for forgiveness. When both are poor, as soon as the devotee requests forgiveness, Krishna says, okay, I'll give it. And a wonderful example of this is in the case of Indra in Srimad Bhagavatam. Indra his intention is really poor, which is let's kill the Brijbasis. And his action is really poor, which is let's try to kill the Brijbasis, and brings the Samvartaka cloud and everything. And there's pretty much nothing worse you can do in this world than to try to kill Krishna's purest, most intimate devotees. And yet Indra comes to the Lord and he asks for forgiveness and Krishna forgives. Now, there's a whole method to that, and we're gonna discuss that method in depth. Okay, so it's not just a haphazard thing. There's a way to do it to earn that forgiveness. But nevertheless, the point is the forgiveness is forthcoming. Same thing with Lord Brahma. His intention is bad, his action is bad. He's questioning the Lord's supremacy, he doesn't recognize him, and his action is to separate the Lord from his devotees. And once again, Krishna forgives. Or in the case of Kaliya, his intention is bad, his action is bad. He says, my mind has been clouded by the poison that I have. I can't think straight. It wasn't just that he was being a snake, he had developed an envious nature towards other living entities, and so he tells Krishna, you've pushed this, you've forced this poison out of my body, but also out of my mind. You've unclouded my mind, and Krishna forgives him. It's the only one. He doesn't kill him in Vrindavan Leela. He sends him away. So, in the case where both the intention and the action is bad, Krishna still forgives when he sees that the devotee wants to be forgiven. There's only one instance where Krishna doesn't forgive in Bhagavatam. And that instance is when someone offends Krishna's devotee. Yeah, Ambarish Maharaj and Durvasa Muni. Actually, there's more than one instance, but there's one situation or scenario. That is, when someone offends Krishna's devotee, like Durvasa Muni trying to kill Maharaj Ambarish, then Krishna does not forgive. When Durvasa Muni goes up to all he gets angry at Ambarish Maharaj and creates a demon to kill him, and then the Lord Sudarshan Chakra is right there, and he realizes and he panics and he runs, And he's going from, he knows he's made a mistake, and he knows the consequence of his mistake is right there behind him, the Sudarshan Chakra. And he's running from place to Indra and to Lord Shiva and to Brahma, and he's trying to get help. He's explaining his story. He's trying to get them on his side. How often is this the case when we make a mistake, right? We're in some conflict with someone else, with a devotee, and in our heart, we know we've done something, right? This is not a good situation. So we go around talking to everyone about it, explaining the situation and justifying it in our own minds. We talk to everyone but the person with whom we had the conflict, yes? And everyone else we're trying to get on our side and say, it was so bad, and he shouldn't have reacted like that, and I was just trying to do such and such, and we explain our intention, and we create, and then we go to try to get their sympathy, then we go to the next person, and what we're really trying to do is to get rid of that guilt which is gnawing us in our own heart, that's eating us up, but we try to do that externally by getting this external topical balm on what is actually a deep wound inside, by going and getting support from others, right? Rallying up the troops. And the Rasa Muni was doing exactly the same thing. He was going to every personality in this universe, Indra and Shiva and Brahma, and saying, here's my story. This is why I should be protected. I'm a sage after all. And we have a right to give curses. We can do this kind of thing. It's our job. And and all of them say, nope, we can't help you. And even Lord Vishnu says, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Krishna cannot help. He tells him beautiful verses. This is like verses in praise of a devotee in Krishna's mouth. He says, Sadhavo hridayo mahyam. The devotee is my heart, and I am in the devotee's heart. Therefore, he says, aham bhakta paradhina na swatantra. He says, I am completely dependent on the devotee. I'm subservient to the devotee. Na swatantra, I'm not independent. And so what should you do? Well, go down and ask forgiveness from Durvasa Muni. So in situations like that, when we offend a devotee, Krishna still doesn't abandon us. He can't forgive us himself, because after all, the offense wasn't committed to him, but he still wants to help. And so what he does, and Prabhupada explains this in a purport, I forget now, it's the first canto. He explains this. He says what the Lord does is he directs the devotee, directs the offender to his devotee and says, you seek forgiveness from him or from her. So he helps us out in that way. He shows us the solution and he says, go there and ask forgiveness there and things will be fine. And don't worry, my devotees are very kind and they will forgive you. So we've got now 4 scenarios, right? To see Krishna's character, his heart as a forgiving person. When the intention is good, the action is bad. Krishna takes the intention, ignores, forgives the action. When the action is good, the intention is bad, Krishna accepts the action, forgives the intention. When both the action and the intention are poor, Krishna forgives as soon as the devotee asks for forgiveness. And when the action or the offense is committed towards his devotee, Krishna directs that person to seek forgiveness from the devotee, and in this way saves them from destruction. What a wonderful character. What a wonderful, like Prabhupada's statement, this is the standard of his character. In other words, if our goal here is to seek forgiveness and to forgive, if that's our topic, then what can give us inspiration, the reason Krishna demands that of us, is because he exemplifies it himself. He shows that standard of character to his devotees. That he is, when it comes to forgiving, Krishna is flawless in that regard. He is extremely, extremely generous. And that's what makes him a worthy Lord to follow. That's what makes Krishna, Uddhava is saying, that's what makes him so worthy as a master, because that's his character. If he had all other good qualities, beauty and strength and knowledge, but he lacked this quality, we would not be able to follow him. We would still be attracted to him, but we would not be able to follow him. We would not be able to serve him, because a moment's mistake, comes very quickly, right? And we would be finished. We'd be done, right? Completely burnt to the ground. But fortunately, this is not his character. This one quality of forgiveness is so beautiful that when you add this quality to others, it makes all the other qualities shine brightly. And when you take it away, it makes every other quality look not only unattractive, but downright dangerous. If you find someone with great strength who is not of a forgiving nature, that person is scary, right? Because you will approach them and anything wrong, you say something wrong and poof, you have no chance. They're finished. You're finished. And if someone is really beautiful but is not forgiving, they become a trap, right? They attract others and then you're stabbed because you're going to make a mistake and they cannot forgive. Knowledge is the same way. It becomes a deadly weapon in the hands of someone who's knowledgeable. That knowledge becomes a weapon if it is not accompanied by forgiveness and compassion. They all become like a jewel on the head of a serpent that is beautiful and yet unapproachable. We can't come close because it's so dangerous. And yet when this one quality of forgiveness comes, then all the other qualities become visible and they become useful. They actually become beneficial to the world. Otherwise, knowledge, strength, beauty, fame, all of those things are worthless. They have no use for the world. They're good for no one but yourself, and then eventually not even yourself, because they come back to attack us, ourselves. They put us in trouble. Our own arrogance kills us. But when forgiveness shows up, then all the other good qualities become visible, they become manifest. So it's really the key, and this is why, of all the different qualities of Krishna's character that Uddhav could remember, the one he pinpointed as making Krishna worthy of our refuge is this quality of forgiveness. That is the standard of his character. So we will pause here, and this is the first part of what we wanted to discuss. It's the shorter of the three parts, and see if anyone has any questions or comments, maybe some realization that they want to add, specifically on this idea of Krishna's forgiveness. So, yes, you had a question for some time, I think it was.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
You did answer one of the questions, like right off the bat.
Okay.
You know what, does anybody else have a question at the moment? Oh, you know what, I just have a comment,
Okay.
actually.
Sure.
So I had the pleasure of going to different temples, and something that I noticed was that I was in Italy, and then I also was in Germany. And then I was like in like the regular city setting, you know, where people were doing their thing. But going to the temples, they were still Italian, and then they were still German. They still had that conditioned state of being, you know, culturally in that setting. But they were just so much, I don't want to say better, but they were so much more refined and working on themselves. And that was just really interesting to see that you could still have that conditioned state, but still it's a heightened personality.
That's a wonderful point. And I think for devotees who are not yet on the perfected stage where we have those two lives going, I think the difference that we can see in devotees, I made this point that people often criticize devotees. Well, if you can't get it right, then what's the point? But that's often a very superficial estimation, because one thing I have found in the company of devotees, very similar to what you said, is that devotees often have many of the same anarthas or challenges we do as people outside in the world. But a devotee, depending on their degree of practice and advancement, is able to stand back from those qualities and observe them and work on them rather than identifying with them. And so this is something actually that's actually the first step in working on our anarthas, on our challenges. It's a very tried and tested thing. Even Buddhists will speak about this, right? The ability to say we're angry, right? So anger is a quality that's usually not a godly quality, and it usually causes a lot of problems. But as devotees, if we're able to stand back from it and say, I am not angry, I observe that I am angry, right? That you can stand back and say, I see that anger is arising in me, right? And it's happening, but I don't necessarily have to be controlled by it. And we recognize what's happening. The emotion is coming, it's going. The bad quality is coming and going. And we see, okay, I've done this many times, and each time, this is the result. Maybe I should stop doing it. Or I go into this situation and I become weak like that. The ability to stand back from our life and to observe it, to be the observer, right? That Drishta, Bhagavatam says, Drishta evat manishware in the first canto. That situated in the mode of goodness, we see the self as master. And this is a very practical thing, that we're able to stand back and watch ourselves, that is our bodies and our subtle bodies, and say, this is what's happening, rather than saying, I am that, and they did offend me, and therefore I'm going to be angry, right? To be able to say, oh, an offense has been made, and anger has arisen. We detach ourselves in the third person from it and realize, I'm not that, right? And so devotees are a lot more reflexive, self-conscious about who they are, and that leads to a very unique quality. And when people are being observant and they're being fair and they actually know a devotee, they deeply appreciate that quality, that we're able to not somehow be pulled into the situation, but to stand back from it and observe. Vaisheshika Prabhu?
Is it my imagination, or are there ways in which various religious traditions tend to turn this the opposite way? That God is unforgiving in all different ways? And if so, how or why does that happen?
Yeah. So actually, it's an important point. This quality of Krishna's character can be taken to the extremes in both directions. And religions often do this. Either the side of God is completely unforgiving, so he's a judge and he's going to send you to hell for what you have done forever, and you're going to burn there. Or on the other hand, God is so forgiving that regardless of what you do, or what your intent is, or what your trajectory is, you're saved, right? You're taken care of. Both of those extremes are basically putting Krishna into a situation that he never puts himself into in Bhagavatam. It's Krishna is always there's always good reason for his forgiveness. And that reason is always based on the response of the devotee. So in this first part of the seminar, we've been looking at things exclusively from Krishna's perspective. And we've ignored the responses of Jai and Vijay, and of Ajamil, and of Jadbharata, and everything they did that elicited and preserved Krishna's response. He's there ready to forgive. And yet here we are, experiencing all this karma and everything, because our response is actually important as well, right? And so both of those scenarios of God as the extreme judge and God as the extreme forgiver, ignore the agency of the human being. They ignore our role in the picture. Where Krishna will destroy us, even if our intention changes, because, well, you made a wrong choice at that point, now you're going to suffer in hell forever. It takes away agency from the human being. We're not, no longer, our free will is lost, and it's all about God, and He's in His big chair, and He's going to do what He wills with us. You've lost your chance. But Krishna never takes agency away from the living entity, ever. And the other side is exactly the same thing, but it's the flip side of the coin. Krishna forgives regardless of what you do and how you respond. That also means that our actions are pointless. They're worthless. Agency has been taken away. And it's also not a very, it's actually very harmful for us, that approach. You know, in child rearing, if we don't create boundaries for our children, we don't say, no, you're not going to stay out after 8 o'clock, or no, you're not going to eat that. And we say, you do what you want. On the surface, it can seem like we're being very kind and the child is very happy with us. But inside, we learn from child psychologists that the message that the children actually get is that my father or mother do not care about me enough to care and to limit what I am doing. Right? It sends them a message that they're actually not loved. Even though the response you initially get is, my parents are so cool and they love me so much. But in reality, in the long run, it sucks out a child's self-esteem because they think, I'm actually worthless to my parents. They could not even care enough to make boundaries, to restrict me, to control my behavior. And so the same is true in regard to Krishna, right? In regard to our relationship with Krishna, that initially this can seem like a great favor, that God is just, blanketly forgiving everyone and everything. But in reality, it does us great harm. It does us great harm to get that blank check and say, do whatever you want and spend whatever you want. Because really, we need those boundaries. We need that guidance from Krishna. And therefore, He expects that response. Not because He needs to see us humbled, it's because He knows that's the best thing for us. Right? He wants a response for us because He expects it, because that will improve us, that'll help us in a way that unconditional forgiveness will not. Even if in His heart He wants to unconditionally forgive, Krishna doesn't do it because it's not good for us. Right? He waits for the response of the living entity in return. So, yes, Prabhu.
So there is also an example of Krishna did not forgive, like Aswathama, when Draupadi when herself forgave her that religion things, but Krishna still intervened and say, no, he still give some kind of punishment in terms of taking out the money. And the example he gave is forgive with compassion, and another side of the example is forgive with punishment.
Yes.
Means that gives, maybe depends on, maybe you can give an insight and what kind of scenario Krishna uses the technique of forgive with compassion, and what kind of scenario Krishna uses forgiving but with some punishment.
Yes. So it's an important point. You see, this points to one big difference between Krishna and us. That Krishna has a responsibility not just to build a relationship with us, but to improve us. And so as a result of that, sometimes like a parent, His forgiveness can be delayed, or it can come in very difficult ways, where He asks for a certain reaction to our actions first, or He puts us through a difficult time. We are usually, as devotees, not in a situation where we are asked or expected or wanted to reform another person. So much of our mistakes happen, and the lack of forgiveness happens in our life, is because we think, I'm going to teach him a lesson. Right? And the reality is that teaching someone a lesson is usually not our job. it's usually Krishna's job. There are some exceptions to this in situations where we have explicit and clear responsibility for another person. Bhagavatam lays this out. What is that? Pita na sasyad, janani na sasyad guru. When we are a mother or a father or a spiritual master or a teacher or a demigod, in certain situations, we have a role that is acknowledged by both sides as being in that relationship. But most of the time when we exercise this role of Krishna's, of let me teach this person a lesson, let me give Ashwatthama punishment because he deserves it, usually all we're doing is we're implicating ourselves in the karmic chain of action and reaction. Before, it was that person's fault and they're going to get the reaction for it. But me now, by giving the reaction to that person, I have now become part of that chain, and I now deserve a reaction back for what I have done. And so that becomes karmano gahana gati, right? It becomes the intractable cycle of action and reaction. So the same is true about, specifically about speaking, for example. Krishna says words in the mode of goodness are words that are truthful and spoken sweetly, which is, of course, a big problem because truth is often not sweet. So there's a third option, right? If you are in the position where the truth is going to be bitter and that person is not going to take it well, then you can always remain silent. You don't have to say anything. Except the bitter truth can be spoken in specific circumstances where it is the responsibility of that individual to speak the bitter truth. Like a parent, like a guru, like a teacher, or like a mentor and mentee relationship. But that has to be acknowledged on both sides. Often we end up in situations where we need forgiveness because the acknowledgement is just on one side. I'm your superior, I think, and I need to teach you a lesson, but somehow you don't accept that point, right? So as a result, I end up offending you because I teach you a lesson that you never wanted to learn, right? And never accepted me as the mentor. So we want to make sure that two-way street is there in order to do it. And Krishna, being Jagat Guru, the spiritual master of the entire universe, he has the ability to say, I'm going to withhold my forgiveness, or I'm going to give it with some bitter medicine now, because this is going to be good for you, and this will help reform you. Shivas Pandit Prabhu?
In the 16th chapter, Krishna says that those who are of demoniac nature, I push them down. So just wanted to get your explanation. It could be that he may not be the most forgiving person after all. So
yes. So this is the verse we don't like to highlight in this seminar, where Krishna says, how does it begin? Huh? Tanaham dvishata kruran samsareshu naradhaman kshipam yajasram ashubhan asureshveva yunisha. It's actually interesting. The same word kship is used, kshipram and kshipami, that he quickly becomes, and this word kship can also mean to throw. So Krishna says, I repeatedly throw these people, kshipam yajasram ashubhan, in inauspicious births. Because they're envious, dvishata kruran, and they're the lowest of men, some niradhaman. And even though Krishna looks very unforgiving there, our acharyas are not willing to accept that about Krishna's nature. And they say that Krishna here is speaking as when a parent gets totally frustrated and angry with their children, and they say something like, I'm just going to throw you to the dogs. Or, why don't I just take you to the market and leave you there? Or, I'm going to send you to India and you can go live with your grandparents. Or, we say things like that, right? But both the parent and the child know, the children particularly, they know that the parents don't mean this, right? Because it's in the context of a relationship that is actually very loving. So if we put that verse in the context of the entire Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is repeatedly promising opportunity and hope for every living entity, then we understand, okay, Krishna, he's saying this in a moment of great frustration with those children of his that are just incorrigible. He's having trouble fixing them. So he's speaking like that. But he doesn't really mean eternally, right? Ajasram, he says perpetually. But he doesn't mean the perpetual part. Krishna does throw us into lower species and for our own good and for the good of others, because we will end up in the human body, we can do great harm when we have that kind of horrible and envious mentality. So Krishna, for our own protection and for the protection of others, puts us into lower species, but not perpetually. It can just feel perpetual because it happens again and again and again. We can turn over millions of lifetimes. But in this case, Ajasram is not eternal, but long-term. Long-term. So, yes.
Just a simple practical question, Prabhu. How you were giving example of how if your intention is not there, but action is there, but still Krishna takes the action. But why is it also said, you give the example of chanting and other service to do, then why is it also said that if you chant mindlessly, you can go on chanting for lifetimes, you may not get the result.
Yes.
But then how do we understand that Krishna takes my intention, but still I don't get the result? So how do I understand that?
Yes, because Krishna takes that offensive chanting and that unintentional chanting, and he pushes us, he helps us find ways to make that chanting intentional, right? To make it. Like he's not satisfied with that. So he will reward us even for that. We can go on chanting for thousands of years and not get bhakti, but we do get other good results from offensive chanting, right? Which is kleshagni, for example, destruction of our material miseries. They go away even with offensive chanting. We can rise to the platform of practically being a demigod just by offensive chanting of Krishna's holy names, right? By the attempt to remove our offenses, right? Just, it's still offensive, but we're trying. Krishna, in the case of Ajamil, he took that unintentional chanting and he gave him a whole nother chance to improve in his character, right? So there's benefit even in that unintentional offensive chanting. Good results come from it. It's not that it is worthless. But pure bhakti will not emerge until that intention comes. Because bhakti is all about intention. It's all about motivation. That's what Krishna is saying in this verse. Samyak vyavasito hisa. The intention has to be good. The feeling has to be there. So what Krishna does then, he puts us in situations where we recover that intention. And going back to what we were saying earlier, the most effective way is when he puts us in challenging, difficult, or fearful circumstances. Then all of a sudden, our intention arises in our chanting. Right? And I've had this experience, perhaps you have as well, of when times are difficult, then our intention and our focus is right there, right? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And you're really there. You're thinking of Krishna and he's present. Because, well, Krishna arranges things nicely where he forces us to recover the intention that is lost. With the hope, ideally, that even as we practice in times of difficulty, Vipada santuta shashvat tatra tatra jagadguru, that one day when the difficulties aren't there, we will continue with that same intention, right? That attachment with Krishna will grow. So he doesn't let go of us there. He channels us into the right direction. Because ideally we want both. We want the intention and we want the action. As Prabhupada says in that purport, we want to live a wholesome life. Both sides be there. In the back, someone has had their hand up for a while. Yes, bro. Same question. Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Prabhuji. It's one reflection and one question. The reflection is, I really like the way you explain when Jai Vijay were cursed, the hurry in which the Lord came, and the beautiful way you explained about his feet and all that. The entire conversation is amazing. Thank you so much. Yes. The question, which is a follow-up to what Mataji was asking, is we understand Krishna puts us into some difficulties, but the mind, I hope the Krishna expects that us to be surrendering and thinking about him more, but the mind tells us that whatever Krishna is putting us is for our good, and somehow it tricks us not to surrender. It just says, yeah, whatever Krishna put us is for our good only, so don't worry about it. So what do we do in those cases?
Actually, if we say that whatever Krishna is putting us through is for our good, that is the first step of surrender, right? It's acknowledging that Krishna is going to, this is of the 6 different limbs of surrender, the conviction that Rakshishyati iti Vishvasa, that Krishna will protect me. This is Krishna's hand at work. This is one of the 6 limbs of surrender. So that response is exactly the response we want. Prabhupada says in the first canto, he says that when the quality of the devotee is that in any kind of difficult situation, he sees it as Krishna's mercy. Right? This is the mark of a devotee's character, because the initial response in this world, when we are in difficulty, right? When we're in trouble, our immediate response, the standard response on the street is what? Who did this to me, right? And we point the blame to someone else. Say it's his fault. He did that to me. If you're a little bit better, if you're a little more advanced, or quite a bit more advanced, then instead of saying when you're in trouble, instead of saying it was his fault, you will say what? It's my fault, right? I did it. It's my karma. And if someone is truly advanced, then they point to Krishna and they say it's Krishna's fault. He's doing. No, not Krishna's fault. It's his mercy, right? It's his Krishna's fault is still stage number 1, but Krishna's mercy that this is actually good.
But if it stops us from helplessly praying for God's mercy, what do we do in that case? I mean, we keep thinking that, yeah, whatever is doing for our good, so he'll do the next step also for our good only. But that thinking somehow, at least personally for me, doesn't make me helpless in my calling out for Krishna in my chant.
If we don't become helpless, Krishna is just going to tighten the screw a little bit more. Until we do go to him and say, okay, really, I've run out of options now. Please help me. I can't solve this myself. Right? That's what he did with Arjun. He came, Karparnya dosho pahata swabhava pricha. He said, I can't handle this. Krishna had to tighten till it came to that point. So hopefully we can get there before Krishna has to do so much.